For many centuries, the priestess of Delphi was the most renowned oracle in the world. People made long pilgrimage to listen to her revelations, which were inspired by Gaia, the primordial Earth Mother. During the long Paleolithic Ice Age in Europe, small carved figures of bone, ivory, and stone were objects of reverence. They were found at entrances of cave sanctuaries and at dwelling sites. Their art formed a powerful bridge between the soul and nature. In deep, womb-like cave sanctuaries, a shaman invoked the animal spirits to grant a successful hunt, with rituals designed to ensure the animal's return each season. Hunters and gatherers carried the small figures with them and gave them places of honor in their shelters. Through their own acts of creation, they invoked the creative powers of nature. The Venus of Losel stands at the entrance of a cave, with one hand holding a crescent horn and the other pointing to her pregnant belly. She symbolized the sacred relationship between the animal of the hunt, the moon, and woman's fertility. The Venus figures document the beginning of the goddess religion. Some 12,000 years ago, the nomadic path of the hunters and gatherers from Western Europe to Siberia was coming to an end. As the mile-high glaciers withdrew, the mammoth and bison retreated northward in the wake of the ice. In the struggle for survival came the agricultural revolution. Civilizations began as people settled in the river valleys in the newly warmed lands of old Europe and on the plateaus of Asia Minor. Women learned to sow the wild grain. In both old Europe and Asia Minor, the Mother Earth of the Paleolithic Age evolved into the great goddess of the Neolithic Age. The people saw that the cycles of the natural world paralleled the three ages of woman: maiden, mother, and crone, and in turn, the activities of women. The domestication of animals, the cultivation of the grain, and the birth of children. These paralleled the powers of the goddess. In the 7th millennium BC, Çatalhöyük was a prosperous and peaceful trading town on the fertile plains of Anatolia. In homes, 1 out of every 5 rooms had a shrine to the goddess. In the grain bin of one of the homes, a figure in act of giving birth was found. Enthroned, crowned, and flanked by felines, which became a sacred attribute, she was the great goddess of Çatalhöyük, goddess of the animal, plant, and human worlds. Her divine power was to the agricultural people what the Venus of Losel had been to the people of the hunt. In one shrine, a pair of leopards guard the threshold beyond which lies the goddess, who transcends time and space. When they needed her magic, worshippers repainted the goddess in the birthing position. Often they placed the head of a bull beneath her as the representation of the male life force. In countless shrines, the horns of the bull suggest the existence of a sacred male principle. And so begins the mythology of the divine sun, the moon bull king. This motif continues in Crete. The first known representation of a holy family was found in one of the shrines of Çatalhöyük. For these people, the goddess was a transforming deity. Back to back with herself, she transforms the seed of her consort on the left into the life of a child on the right. A row of breasts in one shrine celebrated the goddess as the nourisher of the life she gives to her children, the creatures of the world. In another shrine, the goddess as taker of life appears as the beaks of vultures in the centers of breasts. The vultures devoured the flesh, carrying the dead one back to the goddess for rebirth. Thus, she represented a continuity between life and death. In her role as crone, the goddess is the darkness of the underworld, the womb through which living things must pass in order to be reborn. Everywhere, the snake which sheds and renews its skin characterize the vision of eternal rebirth that the goddess charges with her presence. The bird was associated with the source of life and with the spirit. People observed ways of expressing their evolving inner worlds. Their view of nature mothered their view of the mystery of being. During the Neolithic Age, small bands of adventurers from the coast of Anatolia, mainland Greece, and North Africa began arriving on Cretan shores. From diverse origins, the immigrants shared a common spiritual language of goddess worship. Caves, always sacred to people of the goddess, provided the first shelter, and for 2,000 years they and their nature goddess remained unchanged. These votive images portray the range of the powers of the death, life, and regeneration. By 3,000 years BC, Knossos and Crete had become legendary. The people of Crete glorified the goddess in their art, rituals, and architecture. To descend into the throne room was to enter a shrine to the goddess. And required ritual purification. The moon at the base of the throne and the griffins on the wall at either side drew their meaning from ancient symbolism of the goddess. The eye of the hand that carved the seal stone saw a lion in the sun devouring a bull in the moon, a mythological symbol of the moon bull king who had to die in order to be reborn. In the great courtyard of the palace, horns of consecration framed the world mountain in the distance, the sacred body of the goddess. In her incarnation in women, the goddess was mistress of animals. The labyrinth, the double axe sacred to the goddess, gave its name to the labyrinthine palace of Knossos. The Minoans etched the palace walls with sacred symbols. As seen in the magnificent frescoes, the presence of the goddess was felt throughout the palace. Women appear prominently in the resplendent shrine scenes. And both men and women perform joyous rituals to the goddess. The bee that gives life-sustaining honey captured the Minoan imagination. Bees dancing in the bright Cretan sunlight were interpreted as the goddess's joyful presence. And ecstatic dancers wearing bee masks became one with the goddess. The snake was a significant image in Minoan culture. And because sacred creatures need sacred places, Minoans made snake tubes for their honored guests. The Lady of the Labyrinth, also known as the snake goddess, proclaims her powers of regeneration just as the snake sheds its skin and grows another. This tree-cult ring pictures another analogy Minoans made between life and nature. Their beliefs about the death of vegetation evolved into the year-god myth. The classical writer Hesiod tells us about this in the myth of King Minos. As the god of the year, King Minos climbed to the cave high on Mount Dicte. His journey into and out of the cave symbolized the cycles of death and rebirth. The most exciting and festive Minoan ritual was bull leaping. If the bull was sacrificed for food or fertility of the fields, he was honored. The original Minotaur may have been a priest wearing a ritual mask symbolizing the animal power of nature. In the countryside, the lives of the people pulse with the magic of age-old fertility rites. In stone vessels, they offered grain and fruit to the goddess, and in their shrines they placed figures of her, one wearing a crown of poppies, another a crown of birds. Day and night, throughout the island, in holy places and on sacred ground, rituals of the goddess were celebrated. But when the bull tossed the earth on his horns, the people fled to their shrines, only to find that the goddess was not there. Over several centuries, natural disasters and attacks by invaders began the destruction of Crete. By 1650 BC, the golden age of the goddess on Crete had ended. Patriarchal Mycenaean warriors from the mainland Greece moved swiftly to colonize Crete and control age and trade. They plundered the wealth and culture of the Minoans. A seal stone from Crete inspired the heraldry above the entrance to the citadel of Mycenae. The conquerors, however, reshaped the goddess religion to fulfill their earthly needs. Their worldview was very different from the nature-based beliefs of the peaceful Minoans. Inside the walls of the citadel, royal grave circles were well stocked with provisions the heroes needed in the land of the dead. The engravings on this funerary ring, the tree of life, the double axe, the head of the bull, and fruits, show the coexistence of the goddess religion with the Mycenaean patriarchal religion. The Mycenaean goddess had a dual role. She passed her mortal child from life to death and death to life. This may be an early form of Demeter and Persephone. The images of the grain goddess Demeter and armed Athena, originally the household goddess from Crete, were taking shape. But something of the Minoan sense of balance had been lost. Instead of accepting life and death as a cycle, the Mycenaeans struggled to extend life beyond the grave. These were the people of Homer, the epic heroes who defeated the Trojans, left their homeland undefended, wide open to Dorian invasions and internal intrigue. The Mycenaeans returned to an empty victory. The Dorians had sacked their citadels and crushed their empire, plunging the ancient world into 600 years of dark chaos. In his wanderings, the blind poet Homer heard tales from a distant past told to him by the people whose lands he traveled through. In different regions, he heard local versions of a great mother myth, and each myth contributed its goddess to the growing family of Zeus, god of the new order of the patriarchs. The inhabitants of Argos worshipped a powerful earth goddess. The Greeks made her into the wife of Zeus. Her name was Hera. The princes of Mycenae had a goddess who protected them at home and at war. Her name was Athena. The natives of Arcadia had a protectress of wild animals. The Greeks made her a virgin huntress. Her name was Artemis. There was a lovely foreigner who charmed the rational patriarchs of Greece. Her name was Aphrodite. The most popular goddess among agricultural people became the spiritual healer. Her name was Demeter. By about 800 BC, the great goddess had been given the human forms of the Olympian family, and her divine powers were infused with the personalities and attributes of humans. Since time immemorial, the inhabitants of the Argolid had called the great goddess that they worshipped Hera. Hera of the unwilling arms, as Homer called her, became the unwilling bride of Zeus. The local people liked the marriage because it was the union of two great fertility spirits. The Greeks liked it because it fused the religion of the earth goddess with their own worship of a sky god. The story goes that the wedding night lasted 300 years. the length of time it took to impose monogamy on the goddess worshippers. Hera was worshipped by all women and was meaningful to every stage of a woman's life. She was an ancient goddess of herds and flocks. If you worship a cow because you wanted your flocks to multiply, you were worshipping the archaic lunar cow goddess Hera. At Argos, she presided over fertility rites and the sacred marriage of the lunar cow with the solar bull. But to the patriarchal Greeks, she was the matron of marriage, monogamy, and childbirth. In order to guarantee a sky god's popularity among a people who worshipped an earth goddess, the Greeks built a temple to Zeus next to Hera's temple at Olympia. Originally, Olympia was a sacred precinct for women. Along this pathway, girls entered the stadium. They were divided into 3 groups and ran foot races in honor of the 3 phases of the moon and the 3 ages of women, maiden, mother, and crone. But with the assimilation of the patriarchal religion, the focus of the races changed. First, young men ran with young women, and then it was only the young men. In the classical era, the games were held in honor of Zeus. What happened at Olympia reflects Hera's transformation. Hera mirrors the turn of the spirit from female to male ways. The myth of the miraculous birth of Athena from the head of Zeus conceals the maternal heritage of her mother, Metis, whom Zeus devoured. The Greeks, who glorified Athens as the city of heroes, required a goddess of their city, and Athena was the incarnation and guardian of everything they loved about Athens. Athena was the goddess of useful arts, pottery, spinning, weaving. She protected women and children as well as warriors. She was the symbol of Athens' invincibility. In the Erechtheion, her matriarchal heritage was kept alive. Pallas Athene was the independent maiden, the nurturing woman, and the wise counselor within the patriarchal order. The olive tree was more than the goddess's gift to Athens. It was a symbol of her ancient roots in nature. Her matriarchal-patriarchal duality appeared in the Gorgon's head on her breastplate. It masked the Medusa myth of the primeval mother who killed and destroyed, as well as the mother who gave birth and nourished. Long before Homer brought her into the fold, she was the very rock of the Acropolis. And all life issuing from crevices in the rock was her life. When an owl flew near, Athena manifested herself as the goddess of death and the return of the soul to the world of the living. The maiden and the mother in Athena charged the creative spirit of the Athenians and inspired them to excel. At the age of 3, Artemis chose the wilderness over Mount Olympus for her realm. Epithets describe how formidable she was, the lady of wild things, she who slays, she who comes from afar. Instinct and solitude shaped her soul. In Arcadia, this tall beauty with wolf-like eyes was the pure, untamed energy of nature. She had a primitive, mystical relationship with animals. Her arrows had the power to protect. Or destroy. In the beginning, she was the mother of all life. In Homer's song, Zeus made the island of Delos just for her birth. Almost immediately, she midwifed the birth of her twin brother, Apollo. She became the one women called upon in childbirth, as well as the one who walked with lions. In Ephesus, on the coast of Turkey, there was a completely different Artemis. Her followers built the Artemision, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Here she was worshipped as the mother of all things. The Arcadian Artemis, however, was not worshipped as a mother goddess. She was regarded as the essence of women's instinctual nature. "5,000 years ago, Anatolian mariners carried their fertility goddess to Cyprus. Born from the sea, divested of her splendid powers, she became the Aphrodite of the Greek pantheon. Out of the sacred union of male and female, Aphrodite's primal rapture unfolds. Asking nothing of the beloved, her sensuality is selfless. The source of her divine magic lay in the wholeness and purity of love. When the Greeks of the classical era first came upon Aphrodite, it was a question of who was seducing whom. She who brings peace tempered the warrior's sensibility. She was the golden one of heaven, heaven on earth. Like all gods and goddesses, Aphrodite's glorious light was balanced by a dark side. She personified the night of love as well as the night of death. In spite of efforts to denigrate her, Aphrodite's as Urania, which means she of the heavens, represents the life force of the universe. Aphrodite fills the darkness and the light with her colors. Like the evening and the morning star, her temple is the temple of all forms of love. She is nearly, but not quite, the last queen of heaven. Last to be accepted in the Olympic pantheon was the grain goddess, Demeter. The myth of Demeter and her daughter Persephone mirrored the life cycle of grain, from seed to sprout to seed. While gathering flowers with the daughters of Ocean, Persephone picked the 100-headed blossom of the plant called Narcissus. As the stem snapped, Hades rose from the earth and carried her away to reign with him in the underworld. Demeter was distraught and roamed the earth. For a time, disguised as an old woman, she played nurse to the child of Metaneira in the great house of Celeus at Eleusis. But when her efforts to make the child immortal were discovered, she revealed her true identity and ordered a temple to be built for her at Eleusis. She stayed in her temple and in her grief and anger withered the earth until all life was in mortal danger. During these dark days, Demeter learned a way into and a way out of death. This is the core of the Eleusinian mysteries, in which initiates had visions that took away their fear of death. Demeter and Persephone taught Triptolemus to grow grain, and on the grain grew ergot, the psychoactive agent in the kykion, a sacred potion that the initiates of the great mysteries drank. Each spring, thousands came to Athens to prepare for initiation into the mysteries of Demeter. The initiates spent 7 months in Athens and were immersed in the myth of Persephone and Demeter. This period was called the Lesser Mysteries. Then the Greater Mysteries began. Reenacting Demeter's steps, the initiates walked from Athens to Eleusis. As darkness fell, they took up their night-long ecstatic dance around the sacred well where Demeter once wept. The Mysti swore never to reveal these mysteries, but some clues are provided by a painting. Hecate and Iacchos guided 2 Mysti to Demeter, seated on her basket of ritual objects. Before her is the Omphalos, the world navel, which is the connection between earth and the underworld. Along the sacred way, the Mysti passed the mouth of the cave of Hades, where Demeter has sat awaiting her daughter's return. The sacred way led them deeper and deeper into the mysteries, into the sanctuary of Demeter's temple. The carvings of sheaves of wheat and poppies on the outer walls suggest something of the ritual initiations that took place inside the cavernous telesterion. Leveled by Christian fanatics during the reign of Theodosius, it lodged the last stage of the mysteries. It was dark inside, and the forest of columns echoed with the reverberations of drums and flutes and chanting. Guides gave the Mysti measured sips from vessels containing the kykion, and each embarked on the final stage of the ritual journey through the labyrinth of the soul. The high priest of Eleusis called out, "Children of men about to pass through death, draw near." The initiates experienced the mythic duality of Demeter in the world of the living and Persephone in the shadowy underworld. At the climax of the mysteries, just as Demeter and Persephone are reunited, so the Mystae are restored to wholeness. But when Demeter questioned her daughter, she learned that Persephone had eaten the food of the dead and would have to return to the realm of Hades for 1/3 of the year. There was no way around the underworld and no way out of this marriage. But the certainty of rebirth at last caught up with the inevitability of death. Return was as certain as departure. One was the promise of the other. This was the vision of the mysteries. For 2,000 years, the mystery rites of the grain goddess Demeter flourished and then died. About 400 AD, Christian zealots destroyed the temple at Eleusis. The voices of other mystery religions, Christianity, Orphism, Mithraism, and Gnosticism, spread across the Mediterranean. When the followers of the goddess saw the growing intolerance of other mystery religions, the legitimate practice of the goddess religion was forced underground. During the medieval ages, Christianity absorbed some of the goddess religion in the form of the cult of the Virgin Mary. But officially, the only true spiritual power was in her divine Son. Despite the reverence and monument building for Mary, the Church suppressed the natural presence of the goddess in ordinary women. Christian ritual owed its original form to the mystery religions, which in turn owed theirs to the goddess religion. Today in Greece, the Easter mysteries are performed in the same spirit as the early Church first celebrated them. It is the eve of Good Friday. As they enter the church, the celebrants remember Christ's descent into the underworld, forgetting themselves as individuals. At Easter, his sacrifice renews faith in the immortality of the life of the Spirit. And the unity of our beginning and our end is resolved. The Greek Orthodox priest chants, "How canst thou dwell in the tomb? O life, how canst thou die? Thou dost break down the kingdom of death, and hast raised up those who were dead in Hades." The mother, the pure matter of the Spirit, ceaselessly reshapes itself, neither created nor destroyed. The goddess's tree of life became the cross on which Christ gave his life. Today, when Greek Orthodox people celebrate the feast of Easter, they partake in the age-old communion with the blood and flesh of the divinity. The priest calls to the people, "Take part in this fair and radiant festival. Let no one be fearful of death, for the death of the Savior has set us free. O death, where is thy sting? O Hades, where is your victory?"
Maiden, mother, and crone.
The Virgin on the moon in the medieval church gave Christians a familiar figure in whom was wed the sacred and profane, the cycle of birth and death and rebirth. Once, men and women lived as part of, rather than apart from, nature. The goddess symbolizes the living body of nature. Though conquered and suppressed, she has survived. We are rediscovering this complex interdependence that makes the earth work. The methods established in the course of restoring our spiritual history rely heavily on the empirical evidence provided by archaeology. All over the world, archaeologists are unearthing artifacts which substantiate and add to what we already have learned about and from the goddess religion. Digging through level after level, century upon century of civilizations, one always encounters the goddess. One might even say she is the genetic material of the imagination. Just as the earth is the repository of the physical artifacts of the goddess religion, woman is the storehouse of the spiritual history of the goddess. Where does one see and hear and feel the presence of the goddess today?